Hello there, folks. How you doing? Okay, today we're here back again today to talk about the Indie referendum 2 for Scotland, obviously. I'm still just kind of looking at the whole situation, taking, in the information here. I don't know which way is best, or at least I'm not sure of which way is best, but as I look at this issue, I continue to find things that continue to make me think Scotland's future might be better in its own hands. So that's going to be basically what this video is going to be talking about today. But I wanted to start at the beginning here because I know my good friend Sharon is obviously sharing these videos into a lot of groups where a lot of the Scots, a lot of you Scots out there will see them, and sometimes you guys have a problem with my assessments, and I get that, but just understand that I'm just coming from an even-handed look at things. It's the way I do it. To explain how I came to be talking about this subject, it starts with, number one, my upbringing. My uncle was very much into his Scottish heritage. He used to dress up in the full garb. He played the bagpipes. He could play Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. He, in fact, one time came over in full garb when we were going to get ready to go to the Scottish Games. We used to go to the Scottish Games an awful lot. And he came over and he was in full garb and he had his bagpipes and he actually marched around in a circle in our front yard and played Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. It was pretty wild. It was impressive. I remember being a kid and thinking, wow, and the bagpipes and everything just were, very interesting stuff. So there's that influence I've had where I've always had an affinity, towards Scotland in that sense because of my upbringing. But as it's recently come into further sharp relief, I guess you might say, is that I recently started a YouTube channel, not this YouTube channel that you're watching me on right now, but my other main channel, where I started talking out about making a murder, some documentary on Netflix that some of you might know, and Brendan Dassey and Stephen Avery. And I began talking about those cases and started talking about criminal justice issues, wrongful convictions of youth, and those sort of issues over there. And in the process of building that channel, I started to get a lot of fans or subscribers from all over the world. And you guys can't see them now, but I haven't hung them back up yet. But I have two other flags that go up here with the lion rampant. There's one from Australia with the kangaroo on it, which is cool. And then I have one from Belgium. And all these flags were sent to me from the countries they came from. So I'm very proud of them. And that's how I've been developing these friendships. And so I've developed a friendship with my friend Paul Capaldi, who is Scottish, and recently have been talking a lot with my friend Sharon, who is the reason probably why a lot of you are seeing this video. And Sharon has been sharing a lot of things with me, sharing, sending me a lot of clips and a lot of links. And I've been also finding my own, obviously, and checking things out and looking at the whole thing with Westminster and Scotland, and just kind of looking at the whole thing. I followed the election pretty closely with the help of Sharon, because she always follows the elections very closely. That's what she's very keen on doing that, and so her and I just basically worked together that night, and I did a little video on my channel talking about it. So I've, obviously I'm, a daft Yank over here talking about this, but I am getting myself educated. Obviously I don't live in Scotland, so there are definitely certain nuances to this that I will certainly miss. But as my experience fails, I have a couple of friends who live in Scotland that will be able to help me fill in the gaps. So that's basically why I'm here talking about this, is, those couple of reasons, the influence of my youth and the fact that I have such great friends over there in Scotland that I've developed in the course of my little YouTube quest or career or whatever you might want to call it here. So that's why I came to be talking about this. So today I wanted to, talk about a little bit about two different things. Number one, I want to talk about if the Indy referendum does come around again, which I think it seems inevitable at this point, because certainly 45% of Scotland voted for the SNP. So if 43% or 43.5% is a mandate for Boris and his Conservatives in the UK, then certainly a 45%, portion of the vote is certainly a mandate for the SNP in Scotland. To me, that seems undeniable, because 45 is a higher percentage. So if Boris is going to claim he has a mandate, it would be, in my mind, disingenuous for him to declare Scotland's 45% isn't a mandate. So you see. Okay. I was sent a video where I saw some footage of some of what seemed like pretty odd shenanigans going on with the Indy referendum vote, with some of the election officials at the tables that were counting the votes and that sort of stuff were doing some really odd things, some suspicious things, and that's what I'm going to show you here. Is some of those suspicious things. Now, I'm not here to tell everybody that this was corruption or whatever. It looks bad, but what I want, mainly by showing these clips, what I want to do is, if there is another referendum, I would encourage Scots themselves to take it upon themselves to get out there and watch and film with your phones and do whatever, and make sure you keep these election officials honest if there is a referendum coming up. It's, to me, a concern, because after I saw these clips, I thought, wow, with a vote that close, with a vote that was decided by literally less than the number of mail-in votes, right? So there was about 650,000 mail-in votes for the Indy referendum one. About 650,000 mail-in votes, and the vote was decided by less than that number. Right? So that's just how kind of almost down the line this issue was. So when you see some of the things you're going to see in these clips, it's just something to make you go, and like I said, I'm not in trying to incite anything here, like, anger or anything, but I do hope that Scots that are very concerned or that do care about democracy, and that democracy means something, will get out there and monitor and keep these election officials on their toes to make sure there are no shenanigans if there's an Indy Ref 2. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and show you those clips now, and we'll come on back. Okay, so this is Edinburgh Ward, and you can see this guy here. He looks like he's filling out ballots. He's looking around quite shiftily. He looks like he's worried about somebody seeing what he's doing. And it looks like what he's doing is filling out ballot papers. And obviously he shouldn't be sitting there filling out ballot papers. He's wearing the official jerkin, right? So he's an election official, and he's just looking awfully shifty. Okay, so this is from Clackmannanshire, and it turns out this is one of the first areas to come back with a no result. And what we see is a strange shuffling here of ballots from yes to no and everything, which is odd considering we just saw a table that was labeled no that had yes votes on it. So then we see this odd shuffling. I can't honestly say that this, I don't know, maybe she just made some mistakes and she's realizing it, and she was like having, I don't know, like she just made it like a really bonehead mistake and put a couple things where they didn't belong and had to shift it around. Or there's something really weird happening there. But it concerns me. Alright, so what we're looking at here is a table clearly labeled no, but what we're going to see here is when we go close in on some of those ballots there, we're going to clearly see they are marked yes at a no table. And there's another one. So there's at least two right there. All right, so I guess what I'm saying is that there may be a need for the honest citizens of Scotland to get out there and kind of maybe make sure their election officials stay honest. And obviously that's something we can do nowadays with our smartphones and our abilities to record and upload and all those things that we can do. So I encourage people to, do what they can to keep the vote honest, because those things that I see there, obviously I can't say that it means there was definitely some corruption or whatever, but I don't like what I'm seeing there. Definitely a little bit concerning. Definitely a little bit concerning. And that brings us now to the issue of, as I review all of the information that I'm currently reviewing and checking into these things and following along with the kind of the UK political kind of scene right now, obviously because of how it pertains with Scottish independence and all that sort of stuff. So I've been watching a lot of things, and ultimately what I see as an outsider looking in is I see the Scots, as a fan of history, and I do watch a lot of stuff, a lot of history stuff from, England and Britain and that sort of stuff. I'm very much into all the, the history of the royal line and the royal family and that sort of stuff, and the kings and queens. And so I've followed a lot of the history. And in that history, the Scots have often been treated very, very poorly at the hands of the southern part of the island, we'll say, right? And what I see happening now is I keep seeing these clips from Westminster where Parliament, or a lot of members of Parliament don't take the Scottish MPs very seriously. I've seen a lot of them where MPs getting up and walking out on Scottish MPs and just things like that I think are troubling to watch, because I'm a believer in democracy, and obviously those MPs were elected in Scotland to represent the Scottish people, and when people walk out on those MPs, when other MPs walk out on them, it is really, in my mind, a spitting in the face of the democratic process. So the more I watch this, the more I see that the Scots are basically not really given much consideration in Westminster. They just, they aren't. And some of the clips I'm going to play here, I'm going to play a couple more clips for you, of Nicola Sturgeon, after the election and everything, and in the Scottish Parliament. And I'm going to play a couple clips for you of some things that she points out. And the point is that the Scottish Parliament, the SNP, they are really all focused on what's best for Scotland, and what's and what's in Scotland's best interest, and what's the best for Scotland's future. That's what they're thinking about, and it's clear that that's what they are thinking about. And I think you'll see some of that of what I'm saying there in these clips. And you're going to also see how right now the Scottish Parliament is essentially paralyzed right now, waiting for a budget from Westminster. And Westminster is saying something like March before they're going to be able to get one out, when it was really supposed to be out already, or in January. And so the Scottish Parliament is going to be scrambling to get all that money where it needs to go when they finally get it, because it's going to be happening so late. And that's what they're dependent on Westminster, and that's just the way it is. They have to wait until Westminster eventually, does their budget. Okay, and so you're going to see that here, how Scotland is now waiting to be able to fund their own public services and stuff until Westminster decides on a budget. It's not ideal for Scotland, honestly. I mean, watching this was like, yeah, I can see that it's not serving Scotland to be under Westminster's boot heels. It's the case for that seems to be growing and growing as I continue to absorb information about this. So I'm going to play a clip from Nicola Sturgeon right now, and then we'll come on back and we'll talk about it.
Is that people understood the SNP's proposition when it comes to offering people in Scotland a choice. Now, before this election, the Tories and their Liberal partners, when it comes to this issue, said that I didn't talk about anything other than an independence referendum. Now, since we've won the election, they're trying to say we didn't tell anybody that was our policy. It is completely ridiculous. But one thing I'd say is this. We were clear about our policy, but even if we hadn't been, the Tories and the Liberals were very clear about our policy on this. They said, Jackson Carlos said, opposition to an independence referendum was on the ballot paper. Yeah. Well, yes, it was on the ballot paper, and the Conservatives and the Liberals lost the election. In terms of share of vote, in terms of the percentage of seats won by the SNP in Scotland, both of those higher than Boris Johnson has in terms of the mandate he's claiming to get Brexit done. I have to say, this contempt for democracy is not making these parties seem tough, it's making them seem ridiculous. And the more contempt they pour on Scottish democracy, the more support for Scottish independence will rise.
That clip is very good, and it's like, how could anybody claim that they weren't talking about Indie referendum? I mean, I was following the election. I saw Nicola Sturgeon appearing on talk shows, and I saw how she was constantly being questioned about that. She was constantly talking about it, and how the SNP fully intends to push for another referendum, and how this was not something that wasn't talked about. And yet, now that the election's over, there's the Conservatives there in Scotland, and the Conservatives are trying to say like they didn't run on that platform or something. And then she points out, well, you know what? Okay, fine. Let's assume that ridiculous crock of crap was true. You guys ran on a premise that a vote for the Conservative or the Liberal Democrats was a vote against independence. You guys ran on that platform, and so you made it that. And the fact that we won such a majority when you ran on that platform means that whether we said it or not, it means it was still a mandate. She's just pointing it out that in every single way they're disingenuous. They were, saying she wouldn't shut up about it, like she said. I mean, she puts it very well. It's very interesting stuff. So the next clip we're going to play here is going to be the clip regarding the funding that the Scottish Parliament is waiting for from Westminster, and she's responding to one of the MPs, and she's explaining kind of the situation, and hopefully that it will all work out. But here we go.
Hope all parties would recognise how unsatisfactory that position is, and urge the new UK government to bring forward those plans. But again, I say this to Labour, and almost more in sorrow than in anger, because, doesn't it just paint a picture of how unsatisfactory the current state of affairs is right now, when this Parliament, the National Parliament of Scotland, can't even pass its annual budget because a Westminster government has decided to delay theirs? No self-respecting Parliament should be in that position. For goodness sake, let's make this Parliament an independent one, so that we can not only determine the timing of our budgets, we can determine the contents of the budget for every area of responsibility as well. Surely even Labour can see that's a better position to be in than constantly supporting Tory governments at Westminster over self-government and self-respect for Scotland.
So these are some of the things that I find interesting, and, obviously I'm very intrigued to hear the opinions of Scots out there watching this video. Even if whether you agree or disagree with independence, I'm intrigued by everybody's opinion. So, if you feel there's something I should watch, suggest something for me to watch, and I'll give it a look. As I said, I'm still educating myself on this. Obviously, I'm just some daft yank, from across the pond. But, I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I'm noticing what I'm noticing, and I just don't see. I don't see that the Scots or the Scottish Parliament are really ever going to get taken seriously by Westminster. By what I saw from the election coverage, I mean, everything I've seen, it just would appear that Westminster is just not in a frame of mind to be to include the Scots in the government in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously we got Ian Blackford there. There is representation from Scotland and the SNP and stuff there in Westminster, but it's just when we see how Westminster conducts itself, they don't seem to have a whole lot of respect for the Scots. And as you hear Nicola referring to it there, it's a contempt for Scottish democracy, and honestly, it does come off that way. From an outsider looking in, it does come off that way. Because Westminster wants to talk about how it's, for instance, the Conservative Party wants to talk about how it's 43.5% of the vote means it has a mandate. But yet they want to turn around and say how SNP and its 45% isn't. I mean, these are disingenuous statements. If it's a mandate for Boris, it's a mandate for Nicola. I mean, that's me looking at it on the surface. That's the way it is. I mean, because you're basically getting a significant number of the people voting one way, and that's the whole reason why it's called a mandate. So, yeah, that's it for this. This video. I mainly just wanted to point out that it takes vigilance. I know, obviously, if this second referendum happens, I do encourage people to be out there watching your polling officials and that sort of stuff, keeping them honest, because I'll tell you, some of those clips I put up, some of the things I was seeing were disturbing. I can't say for sure something underhanded was going on, but I'm concerned that something underhanded could have been going on. And so if any referendum comes again, if the second one happens, I encourage Scots to get out there and make sure it's a fair vote and keep your election officials honest. Alrighty? So that's it for this one, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.